how have you found to actually make meaningful dollars to make it worth your while investing your time and energy into it?
Number one priority is to make sure that our hotels squeeze as much juice out of the lemon as possible, that they're as profitable as they possibly can be. That's number one. I come from it as an owner, developer type of mentality, and that's not something you can ever shake. Whether you're an investor in the cap stack or have a vested interest, or if we're just a third-party operator, there's really no difference in the way that we're approaching it.
I wanted to start with something that you and I were talking about, and it was kind of an observation I had. I recently heard Ian Traeger talk, and I've been thinking a lot about the innovators in the hospitality industry, and you certainly come to mind. But a lot of these people didn't come from the hotel world. So maybe we could start there about where you came from and also why you think that is.
First of all, Jake, happy to be here and happy to talk shop with you today. Yeah, my journey to hospitality came through my experience as a real estate developer. And so when I got into it, I had the luxury of having had my own business for a while. So it gave me some conviction that I could accomplish things with related to the bricks and mortar part of the hotel business. And I also had a developer's mentality where I felt like I could figure it out as I went. So I came to lodging with just somebody who had, the business acumen to build a hotel. And the short story is that I got presented with a project to a piece of property that would be typically in our wheelhouse to develop as our traditional projects that we did, which were residential mixed use. And for a variety of different reasons, the site didn't make sense for our typical work. And that was really a zoning thing. And so I passed on the property, but when you're a real estate guy, you get if you're a deal junkie like I was, you try and figure out how it would make sense. And it sort of dawned on me over the weekend that it probably didn't make sense for a residential project, but it probably made sense for a hotel project. But because I did not have all of the traditional trappings of what kind of a hotel makes sense and doesn't make sense to build, I went into it just thinking to myself, I'm going to do a hotel that I think would be fantastic at that place and at that time. And so the end result was something that was very out of the box. And it was very out of the box because I didn't really put into it any traditional thinking when it related to doing a typical hotel. And so I think what you see with people that come from outside of the lodging business, whether it's Ian Traeger came from nightlife or some of these other, folks that I think create inflection points in lodging that we typically don't see, is because they bring a sort of a new line of thinking. I think they bring a very consumer-driven approach to the places that they're creating. They're trying to create something that they feel, and in particular, in my instance, I felt like was missing in the landscape. And I wasn't straddled with all of the sort of typical things that you would look at for benchmarks about whether a project makes sense to build or not. Price per key, price per foot, FF&E, looking at the P&Ls in a very traditional linear format. And, so sort of was looking at things in a completely different format and just leaning on my experience so far in the real estate business to create that box. And I sort of figured it out as I went.
What were some of the things that you saw in that initial deal that made you even think, having no experience in hospitality, that this would make for a good hotel?
My background was in residential real estate. And so my point of view really started with this idea that there was probably a space in the market for a residential style hotel, which really didn't exist, and a residential style hotel that wasn't your traditional, let's just call it extended stay. That's something that was very stylish. It sort of was something that was very connected to the neighborhood. It was a little bit smaller in scale. It had a sort of an alchemy of chic that other hotels in Los Angeles really didn't have at the time. And it was something that I was a sort of a student of, but as a consumer, really more than anything. But I felt like my background in creating buildings and creating spaces and capitalizing projects and rallying a team, and I felt like I could use that and lean on that to create something really special. And so at a high level, it was just sort of a very stylish pied-à-terre style hotel with a food and beverage component that, in my mind felt kind of more like a New York style F&B type setup as opposed to what was in LA at the time, which was, sort of your more traditional style hotel F&B or traditional style restaurants.
What was it on that initial project that made a non-hotelier, someone outside of the industry, think that this could be a great hotel? What did you see that made you want to pivot away from residential and do hotel?
Well, because my background was in the residential real estate world, I sort of was approaching it in thinking that there was really room in the marketplace for a residential style hotel, or at least I thought there was. And I actually did a little research, and what I was sort of came to understand was that there was like corporate housing, uh, and there were some extended stay hotels, and those hotels and those places sort of were at this price point. And then there was traditional hotels that were at this price point. And there was, I can't remember the exact percentage, but there was a large number of percentage of people that were staying in traditional hotels because they liked the placemaking component of that. But they were staying for 30 days or longer. And but they were staying in very small traditional style hotel rooms. And then this big price drop to a more corporate housing type setup. So my premise was, what about if we did a very stylish, created all the style and the placemaking and all of the fun parts of a hotel, and combine that with the size of a more of a corporate style suite. And that was my premise. And I thought that maybe from a pricing perspective that I would fit inside that pricing stratum where it was above corporate housing and below traditional hotels where you would stay for extended periods. And so that was my sort of my math uh, uh, thesis. And from a placemaking thesis, I really felt like there was a demand in Los Angeles at that time for a more urban, bohemian, sort of downtown style hotel with a very New York style F&B setup. Great lobby, great bar, fun restaurant, and did it in a way that seemed a little bit more urbane, more gritty, but still very bespoke and upscale. And so that was kind of my thesis, and that's what I went about making. And so that's what I thought the hole was in the market, and I was, very fortunately proven correct. This was Pali House, West Hollywood. This was the first hotel that we did, and we opened in January of 2008. So that was the entree into the world of lodging.
How did you feel about opening at that point in a real estate cycle or a hospitality cycle, which you really had no idea what to expect, not coming from hospitality?
Ignorance is bliss, I suppose. I think that what happened for me, which was very unusual, was that even though there was so much disruption going around in the real estate world, and in the economy, and there was so much uncertainty, because we got it right, the hotel was just, and much to my surprise, the hotel was just very successful right out of the gate. The restaurant was full, the bar was full, the hotel rooms were in demand, and it was a small hotel. And so it was very busy. And so I was able to kind of figure it out under the auspices of, having success, which carried me, meaning having commercial success. And so I was buoyed by that in terms of being able to, make the mistakes that you make when you open your first hotel. And people were just kept on coming. And so I didn't know that it was a bad hotel market. I knew it was a bad economy. And I knew that, the real estate world was turned on its head. But for me, in this little bubble, um, there was enough success to carry the hotel forward.
How much of the success was based around your strategy of kind of bridging the gap between what you call corporate housing or extended stay and more of a boutique hotel versus just what you created, the style, the design, the F&B, the entire package of the placemaking? What do you think was the biggest part of the success?
I think it was really a combination of all of it. And I think that even though some of it was done on very much on purpose, a lot of it just was serendipitous in terms of, just it's like anything else. When you're in the right place at the right time, some of it is a very conscious business plan. And the other part of it is, I think, you just sort of, put pieces together that made sense at that right time. And we just hit the zeitgeist of the lodging market and neighborhood hotel and the location and the branding and the vibe. We just sort of hit it all on all cylinders. It was just really fresh. And and that's what I think really carried the day. I don't think it's like anything else, in business. I think if you have the right idea and you're flexible, but a lot of it is just, I think, luck, to get it to be at the right place at the right time.
Did you find you drew inspiration from other hotels throughout the world, or was it more aspects of other real estate, whether it was a restaurant or maybe a residential project? Where did that come from?
It came from really all of that. I was, I've had the good fortune of, traveling a lot and being in a lot of places. I knew what I liked. I had a really good sense for what I thought the whole was in the market. And so I was just applying little bits and pieces of all different things that I've seen. The other thing that I think was a benefit was I understood my limitations in terms of the box that I was in. We developed the building, we built the building. And so I was able to, as I was shaping the project, I was able to, be able to take pieces that I knew would work in the space physically. Because you can have, all different kinds of ideas, but if you could put a bowling, I would love to have a bowling alley, but if you don't have room for a bowling alley, you just don't have a bowling alley. But so I was able to kind of take little bits and pieces and keep in mind when we were opening, it was sort of like the Bowery Hotel was just about to open, and Balthazar and Pastis was firing in all cylinders, and Soho House was just kind of coming of age in the US. And there were all these really interesting things going on, primarily on the East Coast. Hotel cost was banging, and there were all these really fantastic things that were happening, that I was able to kind of see and understand a little bit about how do the staff look, and what kind of music are they playing, and what are the lighting levels, and where's the energy coming from, and what are the cuisines that people are attracted to, and what are the aesthetics that really were interesting and felt timeless. So there were lots of really cool things to draw on, and I think took little pieces of all of that and put a little bit of a California flair on it, mixed it together in the blender, and just did it.
You mentioned this neighborhood hotel, and I think one of the apex moments for a hotelier is that the locals use the hotel just as much as the guests. They use it as their living room. They use the restaurants and the bars and maybe even the pools if there's a membership program. What were some of the insights that you gained from making sure that you became a hub for the locals as opposed to just a place for out of towners to stay?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to get right. And I think that what you have to do is you have to it's an interesting mix. You have to hold up a mirror to the community so it reflects back what's valuable about the community, but you have to do it in a way where it's not too on the nose or too gratuitous. You still have to be inspirational. You still have to bring your own unique point of view. You as a proprietor, you have to um, you have to let people understand what you're all about. They have to sort of understand what you're bringing to the table from a style and an offering perspective, but at the same time, you want to still be inclusive. I think that the other thing that this hotel and all the other hotels that we've been doing ever since then is that through your design and your placemaking, you're sort of curating your customer at the same time. And so if you make a place that's really stylish, but at the same time inclusive, I think just and it doesn't feel very transactional, and it's sort of a scale where the local community can sort of champion it because it feels approachable for them. I think that's the best thing that you can do to put your best foot forward in terms of inviting people in the community to the space. Um, and then these spaces sort of take on a life of their own, despite whatever intentions you have going in. But I think if you give yourself those basic building blocks, you're able to really create an open invitation to the community. And like I said, you can also sort of through your design curate who that customer ultimately is.
I want to go back to the kind of career transition that you had, because I'm really curious about that. And I think it's interesting. The hospitality business is so hard because it combines an operating business with a real estate investment typically. And coming from real estate, why did you transition your passion and your life's work to hospitality centric, or to focus on hospitality and kind of leave out a lot of the prior real estate work that you've been doing? What is it about hospitality that you thought was
So I
so good?
touched on this a little earlier, and I started my own business, my own real estate development business, pretty young, and I was sort of again fortunate to hit a period of time where you could be young and entrepreneurial, uh, and have success, because the capital markets were there and the consumer was there, and it never dawned on me to get into the hospitality business because it felt like some magical, sort of uh, thing outside of, you know, uh, what I thought was just sort of the blocking and tackling of real estate development. It just seemed like something that would for other people to do. But but what happened for me was that I had built a really big development business, and we had developed, gosh, by the time we opened our first hotel, we developed maybe over 2 million square feet of real estate, and had built a big development company. And we were developing in Southern California and Northern California. And what happened, as I mentioned earlier, was that I opened the hotel almost as like a side project. It was not meant to be our core business. It was meant to be maybe an adjunct, to what it is that we're doing. But sort of two macro things happened. One was the hotel was very successful, and number two was the global financial crisis. And the global financial crisis essentially decimated, the my core business, which was the real estate development business, and it essentially, you know, we had to completely right size that part of our operation because of everything that was going on. And when the dust settled, which was really late 2009, early 2010, and when I mean the dust settled, it meant, working out deals, selling stuff and trading stuff and working your way out of all kinds of crazy situations, which was not necessarily unique to us. Everybody was doing it. When the dust settled, I had the hotel, which was doing great, and everything else were in various forms of working its way out. And I sort of took 2010 and I just sort of took a breath and I stood still and I was like, okay, I have to, resurrect the enterprise. And I had an opportunity. I wouldn't want to go through the global financial crisis again because that was, very punishing. But it gave me an opportunity to reassess how I wanted to move forward with my skill set that I had. And so I sort of thought to myself, well, if I could utilize my real estate development skill set, my business acumen, my relationships, and target it towards what seems to be connecting with a customer base, i.e., the hotel that I had, maybe that was a better path forward for me. And so I just decided that I was going to focus on doing two things. One was trying to make more hotels, and two was to try and build sort of a branded operating part of it where I thought that I could really bring a lot of value there. And my premise there was really to do something that was very proprietor driven, really was not a design by committee or a managed by committee enterprise, but something that I could really have a lot of influence on and create spaces that I thought were valuable, that I thought were fantastic, that I knew I had the skill set to build. And so was the sort of that was the pivotal part of changing how I thought about that. And I just frankly didn't want to extend myself the way that I had been extended before. And when you're young, you're invincible. And pre global financial crisis, I really felt very I had a lot of confidence, and because I knew nothing but success up until then. And going forward, I was a little bit more careful about how I was going to go about, you know, resurrect and sort of build upon, everything that I had created.
Let's dig deeper there because I think it's really relatable now as we're in some sort of a transitory real estate cycle. There's a lot of takeaways. What were the non-negotiables as you were starting the business and thinking about the life you wanted to create for yourself, the business you wanted to create for yourself? What were those things that you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that again. And if we're going to do it this way, it has to be this way?
That's a great question. There were a couple things. One was I decided that if I was going to develop real estate going forward, i.e., sponsor real estate deals to create hotels, that I was going to do that with a partner. And what I mean by with a partner, I mean that I no longer wanted to take the sole position of, dealing with all of the developer functions, general contractors, construction lenders, debt and equity, tax matters, all the things that you do as a real estate developer, I've done for years and years and years, because I knew it was not in line with creating an operating company. And I knew that if you had to pick a lane. And so everything that I did going forward, at least for the next couple of projects, I did with a partner that was able to come in and handle that development process, to carry that torch so I could focus on designing and making the best properties that I could. Number two was I would absolutely not work with any third-party designers or branding or anything in the hotels. I wanted to have everything to be a really singular voice. I wanted to design my own projects. I wanted to, create my own playlist, do my own uniforms. I wanted to do my own procurement of all the FF&E. I wanted to design and create all the OS&E items. I wanted to operate the hotels myself, and I wanted to design and operate all the food and beverage. Those were non-negotiable for me because I wanted to be able to create really beautiful, very bespoke spaces. And I felt like that was the only way that I could do them on time and on budget. Because the more you bring outside influences, the more they impact your timeline and your budget. And I knew that I could, because of my experience, I knew I could make 75 cents look like $1. And I knew how to do it quickly. And I knew that I could create I could really create a lot of ROI on dollars spent going into these projects because of my development experience. And so those were really the non-negotiable items. Outside of that, I was sort of open-minded about what the process was and where I would where other opportunities would present themselves.
How, as the business has grown, as you've designed many hotels, and that's been something that really Pali is known for, how have you figured out not to make it look cookie cutter? Because you're the same guy doing the same designs. You're not bringing in outside people for outside influences. So how do you maintain the kind of fresh feel, but while still giving it the consistent voice of the brand and remaining timeless? Like, I think about W as probably the greatest brand with the greatest explosion, where it didn't have anything timeless about it. Maybe at the time it was interesting and well designed, but it really lost its way. How have you thought about that as you've continued to build Pali from a design
Well,
standpoint?
the way that I did it, and I can't speak for everybody else, is as the business grew and as things evolved, and I think it's better. I think it's important to take a step back and answer it this way. The first three hotels that I did, I developed for myself. Essentially, I was a sponsor or part of the sponsorship team, and therefore, I was I just was doing what I had been doing before, which was finding a site, finding a building, capitalizing it, designing it, executing it, financing it, and getting them open and dealing with all of the machinations that you deal with there. Even though I had partners in the deals that were handling a lot of development expertise, there's still the governor to growth is just how many you sort of eat what you can kill in terms of on the real estate side. What happened for us was that I made a conscious decision along the way to sort of try and create a brand that revolved around my own personal sensibilities and the design, the tone of the design, and the tone of the operation, and just the overall experience. And I didn't want to do something that was so esoteric that it's hard to recreate. I wanted to do something that had a lot of street credibility, um, but was something that was repeatable because we were creating sort of systems and procedures by which not only could we create these places, but we could maintain them over time, and that we can sort of move forward in a way that was continued to be elegant. And what happened for me was, without trying, someone approached me and said, "Hey, I really love your brand," which I was, that tickled. I was so tickled when someone said that. "And we really love what you do. I've got this property that we want to turn into, one of your signature properties. And you don't have to, all you have to do is design it and operate it as the operator." It just took me a minute to realize I didn't have to fund any capital into it. I didn't have to go and raise any money. I didn't have to go get construction financing. I didn't have to, do my typical rallying of the troops. And once we signed on to do that, really, that's when the floodgates opened, where we went from a sort of an asset heavy company to a very asset medium, and then now to, I'd say, a very asset light enterprise, which is that because of that, we were able to put even more resources into the placemaking part of it. And as time went on, able to build a bigger and better team, and continue to allow me to allocate my time and my energy into the areas in which I can be very prolific. And so, even though there's definitely a right brain, left brain component of how I invest my time, a huge part of it still is on the design side. And you're able to build a design team that understands how you put the Rubik's, how you put, the Rubik's Cube of the placemaking together. The hardest part of doing hotels is that most of the times, most of the properties that we are involved in, they're very quirky. And I think that you have to have a really good background in building buildings and or developing buildings to understand how to unlock the the most value there. So I spent a lot of time on the programming of those quirks, and then I spent a lot of time on creating these jewel boxes. And so I think because I sort of have a really deep understanding and now a really big team to handle not only the design side, but also on the operating side, it allows me to continue to invest a lot of energy into the provenance of the product that we're creating. And so, again, I think it's like you, Jake. I'm sure you've got things that you're really good at that you would never let anybody touch. I don't care how big you get. And I think I think that's just the same with me. I would never allow the integrity of the way the product is created and the way that the product is maintained. That to me comes number one. And so, I hope that answers your question.
Since you have a brand and you're coming to it with a certain sensibility, a certain tone and perspective, what is like the initial process look to figure things out on a new project? So let's just say I own a cool hotel, and maybe you can tell us a story of a property in your portfolio that might help narrate this for everyone. I come to you with a warehouse building or an old building, and I say, I want to make it a Pali product. And you say, okay, great, let's do it. What does that first meeting with you look like where you're presenting the vision, and how do you get to that vision? What are the components that you start with, and how does it all come together?
The way that it typically happens is usually projects come to us fairly baked, some version of baked, meaning that most of the time people that are coming to us have a piece of real estate that they have, and they tend to be local in that market. They have deep local knowledge, and I think they already have an understanding about what the opportunity is. One. Number two is now, and really for the last decade, people are coming to us with already in mind that, like you said, that they would want to do one of our brands in that location because they think that that hits the sweet spot. So the first conversation really is usually around what is what does the opportunity look like in terms of the structure, the location, and what the aspirations are for the project. And because we now have a suite of brands, we're able to figure out whether it fits into one of our brand pockets or brand platforms in order for it to make sense. So typically people are coming to me knowing that they want to try and do something. And then I think for us, it really, a lot of times, once we're feel kind of comfortable with the location and the sponsors that are coming to us, that's really sort of the first vetting is like, is this a particular group that we're going to have a potentially 15 or 20-year relationship with? That's a really important component of the exercise. And once we get comfortable there, then it really very quickly transitioned into a math exercise because we're really very instrumental on obviously running the cash flows, but we're also really instrumental in helping to shape the development plan because we really have so much experience there. We really do have we really are, it's the most beneficial when we have a seat at the table early on in terms of that technical service process. And so we really understand fire life safety issues. We understand, the glazing issues or, any issues that really most hotel operators don't understand. We really understand the development process. So we understand this idea where the limitations of a physical structure, and we're able to just sort of design around it. So that's typically how it does. We don't do RFPs. We're not really doing a lot of convincing people to try and do stuff. It's really more about, can we put our spin on it and add value? And I would be the first person to go back to people and say, listen, I'm happy to help, and I'm happy to help answer questions, and I'm happy to help you in your process, but we're not really going to be the right operator for you because we're not able to transcend the market like we do typically on all of our projects. So that's a little bit of a roundabout way of answering your question. But typically, Jake, if you came to me, and with a building that didn't fit your profile as an owner or an operator, but you thought that we would shine, we would be able to very quickly do that. The other thing, which I think is a little interesting about us, which I don't know how a lot of other people do it, but you get a ton of principal attention, even though we've got 30 properties in our orbit. There's a lot of principal attention because I would never really get involved in anything that I didn't feel we could translate into something really special that could stand on the shoulder of all that we've created so far. And so there's a ton of principal attention. And so I'm really out front, typically at the beginning, to help figure out how to best skin the cat.
There's, I think, two ways to build a brand. One way in hotel speak is you go out and you tell people that you're building a brand and you're going to have this hotel in every major gateway city. It's going to be the greatest thing, and you have nothing today. The other way is to start with one hotel and then build another hotel and then slowly figure out that it's working. Can you talk about the moment when you realized, hey, I might actually have a brand here and what it means to have a brand? And now you have a couple different brands under an umbrella or collection of hotels.
There's been a few watershed moments in terms of that because, I was very I was very hesitant up front to say I've got a brand and, the brand is going to somehow add value, because I just, that's a very dangerous territory. Everybody has that quote unquote brand. And so it's very, and I've seen a lot of what you said. They go to Alice and they announce a brand. And then 5 years later, you're like, whatever happened to that? Nothing ever happens. I think I'm a huge believer in putting one foot in front of the other. I'm also a huge believer in doing better every time you go out there and create something, because I really believe you can do better. I don't think that means spending more money. I just think it means doing a better job at creating spaces. So what happened for me was that when we opened the first property, it was called Pali House. And when I was going to do the second property, my first inclination was to not call it Pali anything. I thought I was just going to do more of, what most people do is call it something else. And I even registered a domain name for the location where the hotel was, the street name, whatever.com. And my wife said to me, "You're out of your mind." She said, "What are you talking? You've got this burgeoning brand. You need to call it Pali Hotel," because it was more of a traditional style hotel. And I was like, I really credit her for sort of making me see that there was a there. And when we opened that property, and I thought for sure, who knew it was our second property? I didn't know. I was still had PTSD from the global financial crisis. And we opened the door and we were sold out the first night. And basically the hotel is just full every night. Ever since then, that was, 13 years ago or something like that. And so that's when I realized that the name was able to carry over. And then what happened, and this is sort of interesting, the third hotel that we opened, which was our Pali House in Santa Monica, when we opened that property, immediately, and that property got a lot of notoriety for a lot of different reasons, but it was very successful right out of the gate. And what I noticed was that when we opened that property, our West Hollywood Pali House got a rate bump. Not because we were doing anything different. It was just that the brand was rising all ships. And so those were the two moments where I realized that we were sort of onto something. And then, of course, when people started to approach us about doing Pali stuff, and it made me realize that we were sort of doing something right with respect to that. Fast forward to today, and the final comment I would make on it is that across the entire portfolio, our hotels overpenetrate their competitive set. And I believe that very strongly, and it has to do, in my opinion, has to do with not only the good work that we do just in terms of the blocking and tackling of operating hotels. I think a lot of it is just leaning on the strength of the brand and what we bring to the table with respect to that, and people feeling connected to it. And we can dig deeper into that and the profile of our hotels, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to talk about as well if we get to it. But that's, I think, the background of the sort of the stepping stones of how I thought to realize that we actually had a brand.
Well, let's get there and talk about what the brand is. And maybe you could start off by describing some of the mistakes you made in the early days and what some of the key components are now, whether it's physical components like has to have a pool or has to have a coffee shop or a bar, or it could be something simple like we like a special refrigerator in the room. What were those mistakes early on? And then what are the key things that very early on you make clear have to be a certain way?
The first thing regarding mistakes, I think that for me, the way that I would describe it is that I don't think we made any real existential macro mistakes along the way, but we made a ton of mini sort of varying versions of mini mistakes along the way. And the reason is because obviously you're learning the business, but we're also in a very particular space in the business. And let me sort of transition now over to that, which is that the first hotel we opened was 38 rooms. The second hotel we opened was 33 rooms. And the third hotel we opened was 37 rooms or something like that, 37, 33, 38. So really the way we started was like this small regional operator with small key count. And I knew that the reason I wanted to do that was because if the hotel was a 100-room hotel or a 150-room hotel, I just didn't have the ability to pull that off. And number two is I didn't want to compete with the people that had 100 and 150-room hotels, because those hotel operators, typically larger flags, are able to cast really wide nets. And it's just a big chunk of risk to take when you don't have that kind of experience. And so for me, I really thought that if I could provide institutional quality thinking, math, again, business acumen, behind smaller assets that had really powerful branding, that I thought that in and of itself was probably a good business plan, just from the way that we're able to take bite-sized pieces of risk, bite-sized pieces of exposure in a market from selling rooms perspective, and grow the brand in an area that other people were not really interested in going unless they were sort of smaller mom and pop operators. So that was the good news. The bad news is, when you have hotels that small, scale is very challenging. And so it's very difficult to, most people would not touch it with a 10-foot pole because they're like, there's no way to make money in small hotels. But of course, going back to the first thing we talked about, which is that, coming to the hotel business from outside of the hotel business, was I just didn't believe that. Like, I just either didn't believe it or I was too naive to believe it. But I really thought that there was a way to create an operating system and protocols and procedures in a way that with a limited service platform, you could be successful providing top tier operations and branding to smaller keyed hotels. Nobody liked that idea except me at the time. And so that was really big part of my business premise, which was that I wasn't going to go after the larger properties. I was going to sort of become the specialist in smaller, what I call neighborhood style hotels. I don't really call them boutique hotels. I don't really call them lifestyle hotels. I really call them neighborhood hotels because they're sort of not big enough to kind of have that overture. And as time went on, and as we grew the portfolio, our hotels now range in size from 24 rooms to 120 rooms, but our average key count is 60 rooms. So we've maintained that discipline where we have smaller boxes. And what I like to say is we sort of have institutionalized the neighborhood hotel. And institutionalized is not a very sexy word from a consumer perspective, but for this podcast and our listeners today, what I mean by that is we've created an operating platform and an operating system and an operating infrastructure that really gives smaller key hotels the same horsepower as a 150 room hotel. And we're achieving equal to or better GOP margins by having sort of, like I said earlier, made a lot of micro mistakes along the way about how to operate these things. You have to try a lot of things on for size. You have to make mistakes along the way. You have to give it a lot of principal attention. And, you know, you also have to make a huge investment of money and time in order to get to a certain scale level where it, in essence, is able to support itself. So those are sort of the high level operating principles by which we approach this. So, we're not the right candidate for, I would say, a 200 room convention hotel. We're just not set up to do that. But we're really good at doing quirky 40 room hotels in urban cores, or even some destination, drive-to markets and stuff like that. So we've sort of mastered that sensibility. And because of that, I really feel like we've become best in class in that area. And that's a very hard thing to do in lodging, is to be best in class in anything, because there's so many great operators out there and so many great brands.
I love the idea of a neighborhood hotel, and I personally am drawn to staying in much smaller hotels that feel like you're staying in your coolest friend's guest house or a little cottage. And I think now more institutional investors are actually buying into that, because certainly over the past couple of years, you've seen these mega trades of these big hotels, but you've also seen incredibly high price per key trades of smaller hotels by major, like it might be a REIT or a big sovereign fund buying a hotel, call it sub 80 rooms. I want to talk about like the dollars and cents, like how sure you might have a GOP margin, but how have you found to actually make meaningful dollars to make it worth your while investing your time and energy into it, but also making it worth the while of your company to be able to build a company on that level of revenue, which I don't know anything about. Maybe you're able to generate revenues that a 100-room hotel generates. But that, I think, is an interesting question, and one that pushes a lot of people away from you because they're concerned how they can support their operating business. And also they're concerned about their investment in time in something that, might be profitable, but on the whole, from a dollar perspective, small.
I think I understand your question. I'm going to answer it this way. My first and foremost, my number one priority is to make sure that our hotels squeeze as much juice out of the lemon as possible, that they're as profitable as they possibly can be. That's number one. Because I come from it as an owner, developer type of mentality, and that's not something you can ever shake, right? So whether you're an investor in the cap stack or have a vested interest, or if we're just a third party operator, there's really no difference in the way that we're approaching it. And because of that, and because I do own hotels within our portfolio, I don't treat my hotels any differently than I treat anybody's hotel. So I'll say that first and foremost. Number two is I've had my own business for long enough now that I have zero interest in running an enterprise that's not profitable. It's just, when you're young and you're willing to do it, and I did do it when I was young, but when you get to a certain point, you're like, I'm just not doing it. So as an enterprise, we're a very profitable operating company. And the reason is because we really have figured out a way to set up our infrastructure that makes sense. Now, one of the other components about our business, which is a little unique, is that we're also the design firm. So there's fees and income that are coming in on the technical service component, that's supersized to a traditional operator where, we're getting paid to actually do all the interior design, the interior, architecture. We're doing all our procurement in-house. So there's certain supersized fees on a per key basis that we're earning that others don't. So there's certain benefits obviously associated with that. And again, I think it's like anything else. I see a lot of P&Ls, obviously, from hotels that come to us to acquire, what have you. And then I also see some operating company P&Ls, for a variety of different reasons. And really what I'm finding is that there's really not a discipline in terms of spending money on the operating side at the operating company. So I think that if you can create a small, nimble, high-powered, prolific operating company that's profitable, I'm here to tell you that that's possible to do. So it's definitely worth my while to be doing that. And at the same time, we're obviously building intrinsic value just by growing the company and building enterprise value along the way, which obviously is something that I'm always thinking about and how to grow that going forward.
What are the key things that you've learned through this process about making the parent company, the operating business, profitable in terms of how you set up procedures and SOPs, or maybe strategically how you run the business? Maybe there's clusters of hotels that you tend to focus on. What are some of those insights that you've gained that really differentiate your business from some of the others you've seen?
I think a lot of it is, for us, we're like, we play like more like a zone defense, right? As opposed to a man-to-man. And what I mean by that is we're able to cover regions on every level, whether it's revenue management, operations, food and beverage, human resources, accounting, in a way where we can sort of run the company like a collection of hotels as opposed to one-off ventures. And it allows us to cluster the operations, because if you have 5 hotels and it's a total of 250 or 300 rooms, you're able to kind of treat all of that as if it's a one property in a way. So we're able to, through technology and a variety of different things, really roll up the operation in real time in a way that is very efficient to run. And because our brands our systems, our protocols and procedures are exactly the same across every brand, and our, in a lot of instances, our music playlists, our uniforms, our OS&E packages, all the different kinds of things, the way that we were operating it becomes very centralized, and we're able to really streamline our process, which allows not only the hotels to themselves benefit because they have less of a cost burden to do that, but also the power of the brand is that you are repeating the same thing over and over and over again, and you can create a really strong team and a really strong bench by, in terms of, from our operating perspective, by treating all the hotels exactly the same. Every reporting package is the same. Every P&L is the same. Every revenue management, obviously from market to market varies, but the way that we approach everything, our HR procedures, our handbooks, everything is completely standardized. So, to me, in a lot of ways, it's almost like running one big hotel as opposed to 25 individual assets.
What's been the hardest part about growing the brand?
I would say the hardest part was in the early days, you kind of doing everything yourself. You're trying to figure out human resources. You're trying to figure out how to, the best way to handle your accounting team and how to do sales. And you're doing it with, a small handful of people, and it's just really hard to do. And you're doing most of it with common sense. And a lot of times in this business, in any business, it's really not about common sense. It's about what is the tried and true, smart technical way about approaching certain things. And of course, so I would say the hardest part was early days, kind of doing everything yourself. The big transition for us was that we went through a 2018, 2019, I think we opened, 10 hotels or something. It was like a massive uh, expansion. And on average, we open, last 12 months, we've opened 6 hotels. So it's like one every 60 days. So, so what is good about that process? It allows you to build a better team. And in 2018 or 2019, I brought on like almost like a chief of staff, just somebody to help me cover all the bases. And this person was really took to it really well and successful. And that person's now the president of the company. And he's been so fantastic with respect to coming in and providing a lot of structure and building out a great operating team. And so, by being in this position where we're able to operate in a very centralized way, we're able to really bring in, I think, best in class in their area. So we're able to bring in an absolutely incredible human resources VP. We've got incredible sales and marketing VP, incredible finance VP, you know, all the way across the board. My wife is in the business with me. And she runs all of our branding, so she's been absolutely incredible, and just in terms of you know uh, really creating this customer facing uh, set of brands and tone, and how we interact with our customers at large, and and my son's in the business with us, so it definitely has this sort of the family business sensibility. And there's sort of a handful of people that are really great. Oh, and the other thing that we have, which is really interesting, is um, there's a gentleman that's been working with me for 25 years, and he heads up our execution side of our business. And so he interfaces with all of our hotel partners about the development process, the FF&E process, the building the projects out. It's like a really big part of our infrastructure. And so, and all these people I'm talking about are as good as I've ever seen, and they're just absolutely incredible. And I think that's been a huge part of our growth trajectory, is by having just really great people. It's made life a lot easier and allowed me to focus more of my time on the placemaking, as opposed to, you know, what kind of insurance to get for next year.
You're working on the business and not in the business.
That's right.
When you're thinking about a new market, and I'm looking at your portfolio, there are some markets that seem obvious, or ones that are like, oh yeah, I'm sure they're going to be successful there. There are others that I'm like, wow, I don't know that. I'm surprised they would have gone there. What did they see that I didn't? What do you look for in a new market to know if one of your hotels are going to be successful? Or do you think you've created something where there's so many markets today that are just where people are just craving what you've done?
I think it's all of those things. Here's the way I would answer it. We're not really market creators. We're really more market capturers. It's not like a destiny. We're not like an Amman or something like that that builds a Amman in the middle of the desert and people literally flock to it. So what we do is we aggregate demand in a market for our kind of product, and that's kind of, we funnel people into the product. What I've learned is that a lot of times brands stick their nose up in the air and are very persnippety about markets that they're going to go in, because they're like, oh, I'm only going to go in the top 10 markets in the country. For whatever reason, I'm not sure there's really any thinking behind that, other than they think that those locations have the most cachet. And I get it. But what I've really learned over time is that almost every market that I go in that's 500,000 people and above, let's just say, could even go down to 300,000 people, but let's just call it 250,000 people and above. Absolutely every single one of those markets is looking for their go-to neighborhood hotel. Every single market that I go to is looking for the market, the hotel that they can champion, that they're proud of. And so now we've got this, profile of brands that we're able to go into, whether it's Nashville, Tennessee, Nashville or Tampa or Memphis or Albuquerque, and we can plant a flag there and say, hey, look, this is your hotel. This is the hotel that, when your friends come into town or your family comes into town or you're making a recommendation about where to stay, you can make this recommendation and you can feel really good about it. You can say, you know what, it's great. And by the way, I know the GM, Mark, and you should, here's his number. And I think that that's what I've really learned. And so, for example, we just opened a hotel in Tampa in an area called Hyde Park. And that was not a location that was on my radar by any means to open up a hotel in Tampa. But, I got exposed to the opportunity. The sponsor was incredible sponsor, very sophisticated. They owned almost all of the retail in Hyde Park Village. And they came to us and they said, we've got this second floor of this building that we have, and we're thinking it's an office building and we're just going to gut it. We'd love for you to do a hotel here with us. And when you really dig in and you understand the demographics and the fact that that customer has not been serviced at all. And when I say the customer, I'm talking about the local community does not have a hotel that they call their own. You see that there's a really interesting pocket of demand there. And because our hotels are trend on the smaller side, we're not taking a huge piece of risk. We're not building a 250 room, whatever it might be. And you're taking a big swing. I think in those types of scenarios, you'd like to have an institutional flag with you or something else going on there that hedges your bets. I think with us, if you're opening a 40 room, really design forward hotel that is really about creating a hotel for the neighborhood, I think what we find is that the acceptance into the community and the success level is exponential. So I'm getting in Tampa, I'm getting higher rates than I'm getting in Los Angeles and higher occupancy and in other markets because it's just hotly in demand. And I've never opened a hotel in a community more excited to have us. So I'm really bullish on markets like Tampa.
There's not a lot of NIMBYism in Florida, so you have that going for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's NIMBY. They're true, but I promise you, if we were going to open some, something not great, I suspect we would have heard it. And the community there is very tight knit. But so and again, I think we were approached here. We did not seek this out, but again, the people were like, "Oh, we love your other neighborhood hotels. We think this neighborhood hotel would really fit well here." And they know that once we do open a hotel, we don't just open it and walk away. We're there and we're on it, and we love it like it's our own.
Yeah, how do you do that? Because one of the things that I've struggled with as my company has grown, like particularly the hotels that are more design oriented or that need an extra push with programming. How have you found to train that or to find people that get both the programming of the space for the locals and the guests, but also from a design standpoint that know exactly how things should be arranged without, putting all the same colored pillows over here and these floral pillows over here and totally blowing up your vibe and what you created initially when the hotel opened?
It's taken forever to figure that part out because, but it takes a lot of principal attention. I'm on a lot of airplanes. But again, by having better infrastructure and better systems and protocols and procedures, when I go to the hotels, everything is in its rightful spot. It used to not be that way. It used to be like I'd get there and I'd have a complete shit fit and I would just lose my shit. And, it still happens sometimes. I go, And somebody's got to be the bad guy. I've given up this idea of being the placemaker good guy. Like, oh, it'd be really nice if so. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So without giving,
You got to be direct.
yeah, I'm pretty direct these days. Without being too boring. Really, what we do is we have a complete what we call eye for detail guide. So once I'm done with a space, it's completely photo documented, and so there's no there's no ambiguity about what should go where. We're also but it doesn't stop there. We've got different playlists for different times of the day, different lighting levels for different parts of the day, and ways that we want people, to do and not to do. And there's all kinds of different things that we are really fastidious about. But that's why, so it's hard to control everything. I think you want to kind of give people the basic guidelines so they know. And then I think you want to hire properly where you're sort of casting the spaces appropriately, where people have the freedom to rely on the systems, and therefore they're really more focused on creating the best guest experience. Because our hotels are small, you're able to wrap your arms around the operation in a way where you can really get to know your customer, especially repeat customers. And so we really focus mostly on that. But clearly, having everything in its rightful place is obviously very important. And I go to all the hotels on a regular basis. Like I said, I'm traveling quite a bit, but that's just what you sign up for. When you do proprietor-driven, design-driven hotels, they just require a lot of, sort of physical maintenance and spiritual maintenance. And depending on where our hotels are and which markets they're in and why, we're also very, very, we have a whole marketing team, and all they do is programming. All they do 24/7. Not only socials, but what's happening on property, branding. We do all our graphics in-house. So it's a completely turnkey operation. So if we've got something that we need to do in a minute, we do it. We don't like to do that, but if it's something that comes up, if we're, whatever it might be. And so we have a ton of programming that's happening at all the properties all the time.
That's the department I think is missing from traditional hotels, because when you look at a hotel, like there's the GM, there's the accounting department, there's the sales department, there's the housekeeping department, but there's no department of programming like you just talked about. There's no department of design or guest experience. That seems to be missing.
I think that if you're in a big box branded hotel, nobody gets excited about, what, and no disrespect, but no one's getting excited about what the Marriott Courtyard is doing on a Thursday in Cleveland or whatever. So I think that there's no real reason to do it. You know what I mean? That said, Marriott Courtyard's a great brand and they're phenomenally successful. But I think, if you're, and also, if you're a one-off independent hotel, it's hard because you can't afford that person. You can't afford to have a full-time programming person, and any consultant is going to it's not going to be good. For us, we've got enough infrastructure now where we have people that's all they do 24 hours a day. And it's exciting for people. And we're also able to pull levers in different markets. So our programming in Carmel, California is not the same as our programming in Seattle, Washington. It's totally different. So you have to understand the nuance of the community and where's the ROI. A lot of people try and do programming and they're like, no one's coming to our bingo night. Because it's, you know what I mean? Like just doing it to do its sake is really not going to get you anywhere. But I think, and again, we did bingo night, I'm sure, at some place at some point in one night, and you learn that it doesn't work and the reason why it doesn't work. So you have to make that mini mistake. And so now we focus on lots of other different things and lots of different markets, and that's not the same. And of course, we have 30 restaurants, right? So we have to also be mindful about what's appropriate for the different restaurants and the different things and the different lobbies. So it's a whole to do. But I think for us as an independent neighborhood style hotel, you have to create that level of hospitality, not to be relevant or not for something to put on social media, but it's to show that you care about your guests and your community, and that you're making an effort, right? And I think that once you sort of stop making an effort as a neighborhood style hotel, I think you're just sort of letting the community down, and you're no longer really an upstanding member. And I think you have to do it. It's just a cost of doing business.
I want to talk about the food and beverage side. A lot of people in our industry, particularly in whatever you want to call them, boutique hotels, lifestyle hotels, are adamant now about outsourcing the F&B, bringing in different people, chefs and whatever. What have you found actually works, and what's your approach to food and beverage across all your properties?
Okay. First and foremost, our food and beverage operation is about driving room rate. Number one. That is where the hotels make money. If portfolio wide, we're making 10% profit margin across the whole portfolio on our F&B operation, but we're making 75 to 80% profit margin on our rooms business. Where you should be emphasizing. So first and foremost, whatever it is that we decide to do should be helping our hotels perform at their highest level from a room rate perspective. Because of that, your cuisine tends to be not as denominational, because you want to be accessible morning, noon, and night. And sometimes, it's hard to have Chinese restaurants and serve breakfast, at least on the continental side. It's just harder. I'm not against it. It's harder. So number one, that's number one. Number two is, I think you have to have a realistic expectation about food and beverage inside of hotels. Food and beverage inside of hotels that are smaller neighborhood style hotels it's not the same as having a banquet hotel that does two weddings a week. It's a totally different animal. So the way I like to say it is, I like to be the Tuesday night hotel restaurant. I want the neighborhood to come on a Tuesday night. If they come on the weekends, that's great too. We're trying to create really approachable, really neighborhood style hotels, restaurants for the community. So that's first and foremost. That's sort of part of the equation. The other thing is that I think is really important is that you want to create something that is relatively easy to execute. And what I mean by that is, in the same way we try and standardize our hotel operations, we're trying to standardize our F&B operations, meaning we want to use the same systems, the same procedures, same protocols. And in a lot of cases, we use the same menu. And not for every occasion, but we've got an Italian concept, we've got a French concept, and we've got an all-day menu, and then we've got a lot of other sort of collateral other concepts that we have to do, because in some instances we have 2 or 3 outlets in one of our properties. But again, it's about standardization, and if you can standardize it in a way which makes sense, and that you give yourself an opportunity to break even or make money, it allows you then to really, in certain instances, really do great. So we have some of our F&B venues that do really, really well. We're not running them any differently. The menu's the same. The level of hospitality and the design provenance is all the same. It's just, for whatever reason, restaurants are tricky and finicky, and if you hit it, you hit it, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes you have to pivot and make a move. But underlying all of it is really about creating the best guest experience that we can, and to make sure we have concepts that are not a drag on the P&L, unless purposely. Sometimes we have stuff that's purposely a drag on the P&L, not because we don't want to not make money. It's just that we're providing F&B in a way that is, the net benefit is better than not providing it, or providing it differently, because we're doing better on the room rates. Anyway, so that's the answer to that.
Yeah, that's where I was going. So how does it happen where the F&B is set up to drive the room rate? Like, what happens there? Is it that people are going to pay more for the room because they know they can have an all-day restaurant, and that's the type of experience they want, and they wouldn't stay in a hotel without a coffee shop or without this all-day cafe?
People like breakfast and people like cocktails. And They want to be able to have breakfast, kind of like some people like their breakfast at 7 in the morning, but some people like their breakfast at 11 in the morning, but they like breakfast. And people like cocktails at 4 in the afternoon, and they also like them at 11 at night, right? So our programs typically revolve around, you know, very approachable spaces, spaces where you see people from the local community there sharing the space with you. So you get a look into what's going on to that location. Um, and it's well priced and really beautiful to be in. And there's not like it's not like you're walking into some sort of a special occasion restaurant. You're walking into something that is really well designed, is congruent with the rest of the spaces. And also like you have to create an environment where like your waiter will also carry your bags, but also like your front desk person would also not feel uncomfortable taking your breakfast order. Like you have to create that energy in the space in order for it to feel cohesive, where the hospitality is cohesive and the tone is cohesive and the uniforms speak to each other and it doesn't feel too separate. Now, some instances that's not exactly the case. And we have some of our restaurants where we actually have collaborations with local people for a variety of different reasons. And in those instances, there's a little bit more of a separation between church and state, but by and large, I think that's the way that we do it. Speaking of Schrager, for example, that lightning in the bottle that he had in the 80s, that's people have been trying to recreate that since then, and some people do and some people don't. But that's really elusive and very tricky. And I would never go to an ownership group and say, "Oh, we're going to do $10 million of F&B at this hotel." I mean, you know, I just won't do it. I don't think it's genuine.
How do you make the decision to pivot when a restaurant's not working? And like how does that happen for you if it's ever happened?
Yeah, so we opened. So we had we had a restaurant. We had a hotel that opened that had two venues. One was on the ground floor and one was on the second floor. And I went into the second floor concept kind of knowing that it was going to be a hit or miss, like there was going to be no middle ground. But it was one of those things that but I designed the space in a way where like, if it was a miss, that we could use it in another way that was really made sense. And so I think you just have to be defensive. I would say that we take a somewhat, depending on the hotel and the market, we take a somewhat defensive approach to food and beverage because a lot of it's just dangerous. You could have a really expensive build out and no one shows up, and then you just like that's all that capex in the toilet. And so I just don't want to do that. So I think you have to, and I think again with experience, kind of what works as a baseline, and you're able to design around it. And I think but that said, it's getting harder and harder to do because of primarily labor in some of these markets, just very expensive. And I just don't think that, you just can't escape that. And people have been trying to escape it. People are trying to find workarounds for their F&B. But if you go to a lot of these hotels, and I won't name any, you walk around and the F&B is like really built out, and they spend a ton of money and there's nobody in there, and you walk around to your room or something, you're like, Jesus, this is so unbelievably depressing. You have to really figure out a way to not do that. Because I think if you do a really beautiful restaurant and no one shows up, that's almost impossible to recover from without a full revamp. That said, I will say that I totally get why hotel operators, especially ones that are doing hotels that are a little bit smaller keyed, that don't have big, banquet space and stuff like that to drive F&B top line. I totally get why they're pivoting they've always used third parties, but I think now they're really in demand. But that said, they don't really by and large necessarily are going to do that much better unless you have a really high concept, kind of uh, space that you're really willing to spend the money on and pay the fees for in the hopes of success.
All right. I think where I want to go now is I want to talk about you've seen it all. You're building an amazing brand. What are you currently seeing that you're not doing or that you have a lot of energy to get into? Some sort of like an open space or a blank space?
It's such a good question. I will say that, our future now as a lodging company in terms of continuing to do um, hotels under our four brands, um, our destiny there is somewhat baked. And what I mean by that is we have opportunities now come to us in a way where we're going to continue to do hotels, traditional style hotels that are traditionally financed with our existing partners or other new partners that come in the door. And so I'm spending a lot of time in 23 and going into 24 having a lot of conversations with lots of different people about other ways and other things that we can do to expand our brand. I'm sort of thinking about not necessarily traditional hotels, but what are some of the other things that we can do that are sort of collateral or sort of in the same sphere of influence that we can take our infrastructure and our in our systems and apply that to some other areas. And so, I'm having lots of different conversations with lots of different things. And some things are not appropriate. I think it's fun to talk about, some other things, but, our brands, our Pali House brand makes sense in resort markets. So I think that's a potential opportunity for us. I think our brand has legs in locations outside of the U.S. Because it is a uniquely American brand that I think, and a uniquely Californian brand that I think probably has some appeal in some international markets. And there's a couple of projects in our pipeline which are a little expanding or pushing the envelope for us in terms of scope. And so I'm excited about those. Not necessarily pushing our key count higher than our range, but expanding some of our amenities and some of the things that we're bringing to the table to add value. And so I think it's a slow progression about some of the other things to do. But I that's my number one priority now as shaping the company is to try and continue to evolve, expand, think about things that add value. We don't need capital. We're looking what we'd like to do is continue to build and grow cachet as a brand. Continue to big push for me in 24 is to continue to make sure the properties are looking spectacular, doing our annual pips, and making sure that we're adding just as much robust and vigor and passion to maintaining the properties that we always have. It's a huge part of my emphasis. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but happy to answer any specifics. But I am definitely looking to do things that are a little bit outside of just another hotel management agreement in another market to do another one of our brands. I think we're going to continue to do that and we love that as our core business, but there's other things to do for sure.
Is membership clubs interesting to you, given that you're a neighborhood hotel and people would maybe look for more ways to experience the brand without having to stay there or the property?
Yeah, as every membership club on paper is like a dream come true, right? Like you're like, oh my God, this is the best business you've ever seen.
I saw one the other day.
Yeah. It's like, I've seen so many decks about somebody that's going to do a membership around whatever. And, you get 1,000 members and it's like you could just retire. I think membership clubs are very difficult to do for a variety of different reasons, because talk about programming and talk about placemaking and talk about, keeping it fresh and maintaining members. And, it's a very challenging thing to do. In my mind, there's Soho House, and then there's like, a couple of other people that are doing micro clubs, but only a handful are doing them well, or let's put it this way, only a handful of them are doing them successfully. So that's my very roundabout way of saying that I think that there's a pathway for us to do it, but it would really be only way to do it in a very small, calculated way, not in a way where it's underwritten on its own as a standalone piece of business. I just think, for us, it's not where we're at yet. I never say never, but I just don't see that as a real big push for us in a sort of in a significant way. That said, like I said, there are probably some small little bits of business to capture here and there in very small, interesting ways.
Have
Unless
you
you got an
explored
idea, unless you
acquisitions of, yeah, tell me.
no, unless you've got one for me, I'm all ears. But
100%. We're going to come up with ideas together. This is going to be like, I want to keep talking to you. Actually, one of my goals for the next 3 years is to create a brand, but it's more based on having more kind of these experiential but smaller scale hotels similar to what you do. And you were actually an inspiration of that little vision exercise that I did last week. So I guess thank you. And if I have a good idea, because you've given me plenty of good ideas, I will
all
send
right,
one
please do. I'm all
your way.
ears. Actually, one of the things I was thinking about you on was that, we've a lot of times things come to us and they don't have a good executing capability. You know what I mean? So we're always looking for people to collaborate with that can take the execution side of this, because that's something that we've sworn off. We just don't do it. We're not taking on that, even though sometimes it gets so tempted to do it. But sometimes we got some really great stuff that people are just like, don't really know how to get it from here to there, but it's really great opportunities. But so maybe I'll start running some stuff by you.
Yeah, I would love that. And I actually think the value that you bring as a one-stop shop for someone that has little to no knowledge of hospitality is tremendous, because a lot of times where these hotel projects get off the rail or screwed up is by dealing with so many different stakeholders, and the designer, the architect, the brand, the manager. Sometimes the brand and the manager are different, and you provide a very cohesive environment that could also be a big challenge for an owner who wants to insert their vision. So maybe kind of the place we'll go last is, how have you found to navigate with owners and partners having such a clear and focused vision?
I'm going to say a couple things. First thing I would say is, of our 30 hotels in our orbit, I think we only have like 7 or 8 owners. So most of our ownership groups are multiple ownership groups. One group has 7 hotels with us. So the reason, and the reason that is because we are a one-stop shop. If we have the ability to come in, underwrite the deals, program the deals, design the deals, procure the deals, and we're really disciplined with budgets, and we're really disciplined with timelines. So, and that all stems back to the beginning of our conversation, which is coming from the institutional real estate development side. That you learn real quickly that about budgets and timelines, and so it's a big part of what we bring to the table. So all of our successful partnerships are people that let us do our thing, and they appreciate what we bring to the table, and we appreciate what they bring to the table, which is typically the bricks and mortar component, the execution of the physical construction, and that's where we have this really nice mesh where we're able to create a lot of value. And because we have deep knowledge of the real estate process, it helps people that don't understand the hotel business get comfortable with the process, because the hotel business is not the real estate business. It's very much an operating business that creates NOI, that creates value to the real estate. And so we do best with people that understand that we're really good at creating NOI, and they're really good at creating the hotels to inhabit our operating business in, and give us the prerequisite flexibility. Now, that said, the reason we also, I think, are able to get involved in a lot of deals is, like, if you look at our, what we would spend for FF&E, OS&E, and pre-opening, it's the same or less than a flag, right? So we're not spending any more money. And we're also coming to the table with, I don't know, could be up to 10% less in top line drag on the P&L, because we don't have franchise fees in quite that way. So it's a really nice business model, especially for people that are not big hotel owners and really want to take advantage of really well located real estate for hotels that are smaller in size. If you want to do a 50-room hotel in Tampa, it's not a lot of, that's institutional. It's not a lot of people to call. And so we get that call. And so we do that. That said, we're also very hesitant, because having been there, it's also a little bit dangerous, right? It's also hard to collaborate with people, even if you love the hotel and you love the opportunity, but that particular executor is not going to get you to the finish line, or it's going to make your life miserable getting there. You have to have the discipline to say no. And so it's a very difficult thing to do, because you fall in love, obviously, with some of these opportunities. But you learn the hard way that you have to be very disciplined, and you've got to team up with people that are like-minded.
Well, we can talk offline, but I think that's actually another way we can do something together. And there's certainly an idea there. I ask all the guests on the podcast the same closing question, and I'm really excited to hear your answer. What's your favorite hotel outside of your own portfolio?
I think my favorite urban hotel that I've ever stayed at was the Aman in Tokyo, which was just a incredible property in terms of design and style, and the way that they operated, and the Japanese culture, and that was incredible. My favorite resort hotel would probably be, I really love Las Ventanas in Cabo. I think it's not like the most spectacular one that I've ever been to, but I've been going there like every year for like a really long time, and it's just like a really user-friendly, easy to get to, great way to spend 3 days. They do such a good job there, and I love Mexico. And then I would say runner-up, it would be the Ritz in Paris is pretty spectacular too. So
It
it's like
is
that
spectacular.
$1 billion revamp was money well spent. Anyway, so those are my favorites. What are yours, by the way? Has anyone asked you yet?
Well, the Ritz in Paris is one of them. It's funny. The Ritz Paris has, it's not the Ritz Carlton. It's separate for those that don't know, but the Ritz Paris has this Instagram account that just makes my head explode, because they profile some of their team members, and they're not like normal jobs that you'd expect in a hotel. They're profiling. They're like, this is our cabinet maker, their own in-house cabinet maker. This is our own in-house gold twill layer.
I know.
This is our in-house florist. It's just wild.
It is so wild. I think when you're driving that much top line revenue, you could have somebody who's in charge of only sheets. And I the only sheets, or person who's only in charge of chopping, shaping the Tuileries. So anyway, I love that. Yeah, and I love the bar there. So,
and the other interesting The bar they have a couple bars now. And the Aman Tokyo is one that I've heard, like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, the cool hotel people that I know, as well as the old school luxury, like rich people that I know, that's a common hotel that everyone loves it and everyone's just blown away by what it is. It appeals to everyone. It's fascinating.
It's one of those, like, it's one of those places you go and it takes when you get out of the elevator, it takes your breath away. And I don't, that almost never happens, right? Usually you're so jaded, or at least I should say I'm so jaded, but I just couldn't believe it. It was one of those wild kind of experiences in their swimming pool, and the whole thing is pretty incredible. But yeah, so those are, I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to have gone to all those places.
Hey everyone, it's Jake here. Thanks again for joining me on this conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @JWurzak. I'll see you in the next episode.
Jake Wurzak is the founder and CEO of Dove Hill Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Jake and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Dove Hill Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect or represent real estate, financial, or investment advice.